One of the coolest things about wrestling is the rock star lifestyle, the sports personalities, the fact that they're creating art, but they're also an artist that has a personal life. My partner here has recently read the book Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real life story of wrestling's original Sheik. He's going to drop some knowledge on why he liked it and maybe convince you to give it a try as well. Read it and learn about a wrestling legend.
Yeah, so first off, I just want to shout out the author of the book, Brian Solomon. If you're not familiar with him, check him out, look him up, because not only did he write this book, which I was a big fan of, he also wrote the WWE Legends book, and then the Pro Wrestling FAQ book, or FAQ book, Frequently Asked Questions book, which I really love. That kind of just goes through the whole history of professional wrestling. And then he also has a podcast that he's the host of called Shut Up and Wrestle. And I'm a big fan of that. If you're a big fan of old school wrestling, check that out. And I especially recommend the episodes with Dr. Tom Pritchard and Ken Patera. Those were two great episodes. The Ken Patera one was nuts. Like, that guy was cracking me up with some of his stories. So definitely check that out. But into this book, I didn't know a lot about the Sheik. I knew of him. I knew he was kind of a wrestling personality and a wrestling legend, but I didn't know a lot about him or his career. And you should definitely check this book out because it's great for not just old school wrestling, or not just wrestling fans in general, but old school wrestling fans and like ECW/ hardcore wrestling fans. It kind of gives you everything that makes wrestling great. Also, the old school aspect, it goes into a lot of insight with the territory days of professional wrestling, which I thought was really cool. The Sheik was the owner and the big star of big time wrestling in Detroit, but he also kind of traveled the country and the world, and he would kind of discover talent and bring them into the Detroit area and do his own thing with them. So I thought that was a really cool look at the old school territory days of wrestling and how that all worked.
And that's something that we don't all know about. Like it's
Right.
something it's a
Yeah.
forgotten art in
Yeah.
essence.
It was almost like I knew of the territories, but I didn't know a lot about like who was the promoter and star here and all that. And it does give you a lot of insight into that, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, if you like AEW and you like WWE, there was a time where there was
There
a
was
shit
like
ton of
dozens,
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
dozens of promotions all throughout the country. Everything was split up. Everyone had their area. So there was, we all know Hulk Hogan and Flair were kind of these two big stars of the 80s, but at one point everyone had like a Hulk Hogan or a Flair. Every local promotion had like a big time star. And speaking of Flair, it does give you the book gives you a little insight into the NWA and how that all worked. Like Sheik was affiliated with the NWA, but at one point there was another territory that was run by Dick the Bruiser, and he tried to invade Sheik's territory, and it talks about this war for that territory, and it was kind of cool how the NWA was this big powerhouse, and they would send all their big stars for the Sheik shows to kind of run against the Bruiser shows. So it was just kind of cool how they would kind of stack the deck to go against this outlaw promotion and try to crush it and keep the Detroit area under the NWA's umbrella.
Like a ratings war.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, it was a they would have these kind of outlaw promotions that would pop up and try to invade and take over, and the NWA would just stack the deck and send the world champion and all their big stars. But it also is a great example of why the territories failed, because a lot of those guys would hit on an angle or a star or a rivalry that would make money, but then they would run it into the ground. They wouldn't change anything. And that's what happened with the Sheik. He thought he was the main attraction, and he kind of ran himself out of business because he would never lose, never put over new stars, never put new people in the main event. And actually, I found it fascinating because he had a partnership with the Toronto promotion, and they did like the Maple Leaf Gardens, and he had a 127 match undefeated streak there. So it's like people talk about Goldberg streak, Undertaker streak, these like fake streaks, and it's just crazy to think that a guy would come into a town and never lose, and he just kept doing it, and he never thought like, what, I should switch it up, and that's like what I said, a big reason why the territories failed. And also another thing I like, the Sheik was a heel primarily for his entire career. He was this crazy fire throwing, stab you with a pencil, brawling Arabian madman heel, and it got over huge. But he was such a great heel that when he would travel to these other territories and see a guy that was that territory's heel, he would bring them to Detroit and essentially turn him babyface. And it's not like borderline heels turned babyface. These were like killers. Like Abdullah the Butcher would be a babyface against him. Bull Curry, who was another wild man brawler, would be a babyface. And I'm gonna butcher this name, but Pampiro Firpo, who was another wild man. These guys were huge heels, and they come to Detroit, and he was so over as a heel that it would turn these guys babyface. So I thought that was kind of cool. Look at it, his drawing power as a heel and how he got over as a heel. And then the length of his career was just so crazy to me because he kind of started out when wrestling, or with the start of TV. Like wrestling was the first big kind of TV show type sports thing, and you had like Gorgeous George, Luthez, all these guys were stars, and that's when he started his career. So he started out when TV started feuding with Luthez for the NWA World Title, and went all the way to appearing for WCW at the height of the Monday Night Wars. That's like a 60, 70-year span of a career. And I just thought that was really cool how he was able to do all that.
I want to check out now the fact you saying how he was like this ultimate heel where he could have others come in as a heel and out heel them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like if you're familiar with Abdullah the Butcher, that guy was like really over as a heel, and the fact that he came in and couldn't out heel a guy is like was incredible to me, and really got across the how the magnitude of the heel that the Sheik was.
Also to me the fact that he knows the business that well that he was able to do that, and others like modern day wrestlers could take notes on this.
Right, and also talk about modern wrestlers taking notes. He never broke kayfabe. Like there's stories in the book of so the Sheik was the uncle of Sabu, and he trained Sabu and Rob Van Dam to wrestle. Well, there was a time where the ECW was in his area, and they stopped at his home to see him, some of the wrestlers. And in the book, Tommy Dreamer talks about being in awe, sitting on the floor in his house, listening to him talk, and seeing Ed Farhat, which that's the Sheik's real name, but in the back of his mind being scared that the guy was going to pull a pencil out and stab somebody. So it was like even amongst wrestlers, they didn't know if it was real or not. And I think that that's something that's lost in the world of wrestling now, which I guess with the internet, social media, that's hard to do. But it's really cool being able to read about when they respected kayfabe and they kept it up. That was really cool and different.
Also learning about the guy that we all heard, oh, he's Sabu's uncle, but like not having a real grasp on how big of a character of a wrestler he actually
Yeah.
was. Instead,
For
it was always just like in passing, like, oh, he's
by the
Sabu's
way,
uncle.
yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, the nephew of the Sheik, like it was just a thing.
Hmm.
And none of us, for me personally, I didn't know who the Sheik was. I just knew they would say that, and I was like, oh, okay. And to, for me, as growing up during the Attitude Era and at the height of ECW, Sabu was such like a big star and a big deal for me, especially for what he was doing in the ring. To think that where they're casually like, oh yeah, by the way, he's the nephew of the Sheik. Well, the Sheik was a bigger star than him. It's like that's just something that you don't know. And if you read this book, you'll realize what a big star he was. And also, there's a lot of like cool stories in there. But just the two stories I like is him and Luthez didn't get along too well. So there's a bit in there where he was legitimately afraid of Luthez, and to kind of get that over and keep kayfabe going, he like ran out of the ring during a match in St. Louis, and he went and hid underneath a city bus in a snowstorm. Like that's like you talk about wild man like crazy gimmicks. That's a way to get over your crazy man gimmick. You're just laying underneath a city bus, and then in the '80s, the Great American Bash was a traveling tour, and they were coming to Detroit. And Kevin Sullivan booked the Sheik for a tag match with Kevin Sullivan, Dick Murdoch, and Dusty Rhodes. And it was this cool story of how he showed up late. The show was already going on. He showed up late in his limousine and his three-piece suit and all his jewelry, and it was like the show stopped. All the fans and even the wrestlers stopped and focused on the Sheik, and it was like he still was showing people Detroit's my town, and it was just kind of a cool like he didn't lose that Sheik aura or how to lure people in. Like he still had it even in the '80s when he was well past his prime, and it was cool for all these big stars to be in awe of this guy. Like I thought that was a really cool thing.
All right, so there's some little tidbits on the book, Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real life story of wrestling's original Sheik. In the comments, let us know some of your thoughts on Sheik, if you've read the book and what you liked about the book, and maybe, give it a try so you can learn something about a wrestling legend.